I hope for a compassionate, loving, caring Alabama, which I see in my neighbors every day. I just don't see it reflected on the state level, you know. And that's the biggest thing is I see it in my neighbors of all political persuasions. I see them doing the hard work of caring for their communities. But the thing is on the state level, it's not there, and it's definitely not there on the federal level.
Ryan Cagle is the dynamic community organizer and minister who is the Democratic nominee for the special election on June 24th in Senate District 5. And we are so happy that he agreed to join us for our first episode of the Blueprint Alabama podcast, where we will take you inside the fight to elect Democrats in Alabama. I'm Caroline Self.
I'm Josh Coleman.
This is the Blueprint Alabama podcast. Okay, Josh, you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Ryan. So good to see you, and thanks for joining us here on whatever this is that we're doing.
We haven't named it yet, so if you have a name, let us know.
But just happy to connect with you. So I guess first of all, tell us really what's your story. Tell us a little bit about Ryan.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Cagle. I am the Senate District 5 Democratic nominee for the special election coming up, and I'm just some dude from Walker County trying to love my neighbors the best I can and build a different world. And so yeah, I'm from here in Walker County, born and raised in Parrish. I actually live on the same street I was brought home from the hospital to. So I have a wife and two feral children. I'm a grad student. I am a minister in the Disciples of Christ Christian Church Disciples of Christ tradition. But I've been kind of all over in that regard. And yeah, so I'm here again, native from Walker County. I am involved in a lot of community organizing work around food insecurity, around the opioid crisis, and a myriad of other issues, justice-related issues here in Walker County specifically. But yeah, I'm just somebody who loves this community and trying to figure out the best way I can to continue to fight for it.
Did you ever see yourself running for office? Is this something that's been a plan, or is it just the opportunity presented itself and you're like, you know what, I want to help, and this is what I can do?
Yeah, I think did not see myself doing it, and no one in my life saw me doing it either. I'm very much a on the ground kind of person, and but I can see the ways that it kind of pushed me towards this opportunity because I spend a great deal of my life giving my time and my energy and my effort to responding to these crises that are impacting our community. And while I see our leaders in Montgomery doing nothing about it, actually, I see them exasperating those issues more often than not. And so when this opportunity just came up, it seemed like a natural thing to kind of shift and figure out, like, well, maybe we can carry this fight to Montgomery. Like, we're fighting here on White Street and in Walker County and, all these places locally on the ground level. And so how can we carry it to Montgomery and find a way to continue to advocate for the issues that are impacting our communities?
What was it that really made you make the decision? We all have a why. And I ran for state senate several years ago in a similar district. It was a pretty red rural district. And I ran because I felt like my voice was needed. Even though it was a red district, I felt that I could change the narrative in a way about the election. So that was sort of my why. What was yours?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of narrow it down because at first it kind of like there was a little bit of an inside joke I think about running, in my friend group about it. And but what it really came down to when we were like having serious conversations about it, when I was having serious conversations with people around me, is like District 5 has not had democracy for most positions, but this position in particular for almost 2 decades. Not only has the Republican Party ran unopposed completely, that other Republicans don't typically run either. Like, so most of the positions that are, representative of District 5, and so for this Senate seat, Greg Reed has run unopposed from even other Republicans for nearly 2 decades since, 2009 or so. And so we don't have democracy. We don't have options, even if you wanted them. I mean, whether you like the other candidate or not, we deserve at the very least options, and we deserve people who have the opportunity to represent us, who actually look and live and have the same experiences as us. And that's not something we have much of here in District 5, particularly when it comes to the Senate race. We don't really have working class representation. We don't, and my neighbors are not represented, whether they're Republican or not, by the people who are currently in office. And so The why kind of came into that intersection, between wanting there to be choice and opportunity for our people to have options, but also for the fact that just there's no real representation. Not only do we not really get to choose who is in this position, but we don't have people who live and look like us and you know deal with working class issues and are on the ground dealing with all the things that are actually impacting our communities drastically. Um, and so that was a big part of it too, is because I see the struggles of my community every single day, and I don't see that represented in my life or in the lives of our representatives at all. They're very detached from that, and so the why was kind of multifold. There was multiple aspects to it, but it came down to options, and it came down to actual representation of our people.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of times seats go unopposed and people not run for office, and people think, oh, it's not me, I can't do that, that's not for me. And you said starting out you're just a regular dude from Walker County, no, and wants to make a change in their community. And I think that those are the best people that need to run for office, right? People who live here, work here, play here, and they want to see the best, not only for your family but other families around you. So, um, but as we talk about that, can you talk about the makeup of the district there? I mean, we know kind of where it encompasses, but what are some issues and what is kind of the nitty gritty that we need to know about
Yeah,
the district?
so the Senate District 5 is Walker County, Lamar County, Fayette County, and then parts of Jefferson County and Tuscaloosa. So lots of it are very, very rural and disenfranchised completely, And, I'm mainly familiar with Walker County, but the issues here, across the state are just, it's relatively the same in a lot of these communities. But I know, like here, like the work that we do on the ground already just outside of running for office, the biggest issues that we see time and time again are just the what comes with the throes of poverty, what comes with dealing with economic interests being, we have a lot of extractive industry. Alabama is an extractive economy. Most of our wealth is extracted by outside industries, and some inside industries that are just really keen on making a dollar off of us. And so Walker County is no different. Parrish, my hometown, was a company town way back in the day before it was Parrish, Alabama. It's built on coal and the railroad. And when those things dried up, the company left, but the people were left with to figure it out. And so that's a story. That's a common story here. Whether you're a mill town or a coal town or whatever it is. And so um, for this district is that there's just continued economic challenges, and a lot of that, we just keep getting told, we're just going to bolster like small businesses and boost the economy, and what happens is you continue the company men, so to speak, from that bygone era. They're gone, but or the companies are gone, but those company men have just gotten elected, and they ran for office, and they've continued to take tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the candidate, from these corporations to make sure they're voting in line with those interests. And so we see that in a very tangible, material way taking place, affecting our community here in Walker County. I could go outside of my front door, close my eyes, take a rock in my hand, spin around and throw it, and I'm going to hit somebody who is struggling to pay their bills. I'm going to hit a house, of someone in my neighborhood who is struggling to keep their power bill on, to keep their water running, to keep food in the bellies of their children, to keep on the road, even being able to get to work. Um, and so there's a lot of issues again. So like the rurality obviously plays a role in a lot of it, but um, we're dealing with a lack of food. We're dealing with a lack of financial infrastructure to keep yourself taken care of and thriving. We're dealing with the opiate crisis that has been totally manufactured by these large corporations and our government's inability or refusal to do anything about it. And Walker County at one point was, you could get, there was like 180 something opiate prescription pills, okay? Not, coming over from Mexico or Canada or some nonsense like that. Like opiate pills were being prescribed legally in Walker County. There's like 180 pills per person in the county, which is insane. Um, Walker County is in the top, is the top place and has been for years for opiate overdose in the whole state per capita, bigger than Jefferson, bigger than anywhere else in the state. And so that is a crisis that has multiple facets to it, that is interconnected to poverty, is interconnected to the mental health crisis, and our state's refusal to actually build mental health infrastructure and instead continue just to incarcerate these people who need help. Um, and I dealing just with general working class issues of people who are just doing everything they can to get to work and to pay their bills. And ultimately what happens is when you do get a good job here in District 5, it means sacrificing your family life and your passions. It means being completely disconnected and alienated from those things. I remember when I worked at Miller Steam Plant as a contract worker, I was working 6 12-hour shifts a day, and at that time I was living the north of Walker County. I was 50 minutes away from Miller Steam Plant. So I had two young kids who I basically never saw, working night shift, 12 hours, and so it was a good job, right? We were able to pay our bills, but at what cost, right? And so we see a lot of that too. So just because you have employment and have a good job doesn't mean necessarily you have a thriving family or thriving community. And so we see that too on the working class side. So yeah, District 5, it's a beautiful place though. So I've been talking about the negatives, but District 5 is a beautiful place. It's a place that gives me hope. It's a place that I never in a million years thought I would come back to Walker County, Alabama, but here I am, and it's the best decision I've ever made. There's kind of two types of kids I think growing up in places like Walker County and District 5, and there's the kids who maybe three. There's the kids who love it and they're just going to live here their whole life. There's the kids who want to get out, and then there's the kids who want to get out that can't. And I was one of those kids that got out. And I went up to Huntsville and thought maybe being in a bigger city, in Alabama would help, and that didn't help. And so I went out of state and realized like I could not be. It was like a whole other planet, and decided to come back. And it came back because this place is a place that soul is fertile for love and care and for community connection and for actually working towards something better, regardless of your political persuasions. Like the work we do here in our community, we have a community garden we run, we have a 24/7 pantry that we run, and we give out. We opened up the state's first three free Narcan distribution sites, 24/7 sites in the state, and there are people involved in all of those things that have radically different politics than me. That we would not, if we sit down and we started going through, we would have totally different politics. Um, but because there's a commitment here to this place and the people, we find a way to work with each other. And that's the thing that I think that I love here is that we live in a really divided world, and they want us all to feel like we're so divided, even down to now on this level. But the thing is that when I come back here, all I see is people who are willing to find ways to work together across their differences and make stuff happen to keep people cared for. And so to me, that's one of the most beautiful things about this place is that it is just fertile. It's fertile soil for the work of change and connection and community, despite all the narratives we keep getting told about the South. So
Yeah, I feel
what
like
I
we all.
love about you is that you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. And as far as the service that you've done in your community, like people know you and they know that you're working to make life better, right? I
yeah,
imagine.
yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I hope. I'm sure there's definitely people here who are not fans of Ryan Cagle by any means, but I think on the whole, there are people here um, who would definitely see that and see the work and know that that's what we're doing it for, and have gotten involved even. So it's been one of the, again, like the best things that's happened as far as me and my family coming back here. And um, it, I don't know, I can't even explain to you just how awesome it is to see people who just have a totally different political belief than you. Say like, I care about feeding people, and I know you care about feeding people, and that's all that really matters here. So let's do it. Let's make that happen. Um, and so that's something I'm just thankful for here. And it goes both ways. There's so many people here doing good work. They don't get to be in the limelight. They don't get to be, in front of the news camera or anything. And they're just doing stuff to take care of their neighbors in ways that nobody will ever know about. And to me, it's those things that are keeping the world together, in the face of all this brokenness that we have, in everywhere, but even here again in District 5. There's so many challenges facing our community. And for me, one of the big things about all of this is one of the reasons I'm running is because I believe our communities know what they need and they know how to take care of them if they have the resources. If we're not having our resources perpetually taken away, whether that's our wealth, whether that's our time or our energy, whatever it is being extracted from us, we have the means here, or we have the ability here if we can just keep the means and figure out a way forward, and continue to bridge those gaps. Because again, there are political divides that are difficult to bridge and political divides that might not ever be bridged. But that whole us versus them thing is just we draw the party lines in such a way that becomes the chief thing, that's the thing. we are doing our community a disservice.
Yeah, I feel like we're like neighbors basically. I grew up in Coleman. I went to school at West Point. I lived on the Coleman Winston County line. We went to Jasper. That was the big
Yeah.
city where we lived, right? So when I was young, we would get to go to Walmart, and then when they opened Jim and Nick's, it was like a huge
Yeah.
thing there. So I don't know. I just feel like we're neighbors. And I know Caroline's kind of from a rural area too. But when we go, we move and we do all these things and have these life experiences. And I think you get in your bubble either way. You're either here in rural Alabama and you think this is how everyone believes and what everyone thinks, or you're in a big city and you're like, this is just how it is. And why can't people see what I'm trying to do? But to bring it back home and put it in perspective of the people just doing the work, I mean, it's really as simple as people want to provide for their family, have a safe, clean environment, and do the best they can. So I'm so excited that you're running for this office to help provide some relief to people, not only in your district but throughout Alabama who need a reasonable voice who's willing to work with
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, again, those disagreements, and that's one thing I've tried, with my political opposition on the other side of this race, is try to say, like, hey, our people deserve to be able to see politicians and people running for office and our leaderships interact with each other respectfully and still disagree and do it publicly. And, unfortunately, all of those invitations have been ignored. But I really think now more than ever in this deeply divided time, we have to be able to have leadership who are willing at the very least to sit down and say, I absolutely disagree with you 100%, but I'm not going to dehumanize you or treat you as some, vile enemy of, whatever's going on in this conversation. And so, but unfortunately, that is not the way the system seems to work, and we talk a lot about the good old boy system, and there is a good old boy system in District 5, but ultimately that good old boy system operates in the Republican Party or operates in the Democratic Party. It operates across the board, and there are people on both sides, I think, who try to not be a part of that and try to work with other people, but sometimes that those party politics and other things become more important, and that's why, like, from the get-go, we've just been focusing on, like, people over party, people over profits, and people over politics. And by politics, I mean all of these hot button culture war issues that they want us to focus on versus, like, the real actual needs of our people. Like, I'm more than willing to have a real sincere conversation about everything where I stand politically or whatever it is on the social whatever spectrum of what's going on. But for District 5 and for what's going on in this race is, like, we need to take it back to the ground. Those conversations have no bearing on the lives of working class and poor and vulnerable people in District 5. What does have a bearing is whether Medicaid is going to get cut. What does have a bearing is whether somebody's going to be able to get to their job because they can't afford to keep their car rolling. Or what does have a bearing is if people are going to be able to keep their power bills on because no matter how much they're working, they can't catch up. Those are the things that are important. But those are not the things that the system at large wants to actually talk about. Which is unfortunate because that's where it really comes down to. And we keep saying often through all this again that it's not about party uh, politics at all. But if nothing changes, or if nothing ever changes, then nothing changes, right? And so we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again in our district, in Walker County, in this state, and expecting different results. But the thing is we're getting exactly what we're told we're gonna get. Really, because they don't deal with these issues. They focus on all the other ephemeral, or the ephemeral stuff that have no real bearing on working class people's lives and vulnerable people's lives in our communities.
What are you hearing as you're going around, as you're doing your work, as you're campaigning? In a county and in a district like yours where Democrats have not been on the ballot in 20 years, um, do you think people are open to the idea? It's not really something a lot of people have considered, I imagine, for a race like yours.
Yeah. It's been, obviously, there's like if you just go to the Facebook comments, right? There's a whole contingent of people say you have no chance of winning because you don't have the magic R beside your name. And that's coming from people who probably tend to vote Republican. You have obviously have the people on there that are calling me a democrat and all kinds of, nonsense. But over and over and over again, so far for this campaign, we've had people say, I've never voted Democrat a day in my life, but I'm going to vote for you. Or I'm splitting my ticket. Or at this point, for this race, party doesn't matter. Like, there's issues, and people who said, like, I disagree with Ryan on X, Y, and Z, but I know that he's given his life to fighting for this community, so I'm going to vote for him, even though I don't typically vote for Democrats. And so that's been something that's really encouraging to see. People actually have the ability to interrogate that kind of affiliation and say, actually, let's consider this. Um, and I've been open to conversations with anyone about those kind of things, about saying like, okay, well, let's get it back to the ground. That's something we talk about. Let's go back to the ground and figure out how we've been voting and how the options we've had, where it's gotten us, and what it's doing versus what would an alternative look like. And I'm by no means consider myself the best candidate for running for Senate when it comes to anyone that probably could have ran in Senate District 5. I'm not don't have a bunch of promises to make to Democrats or Republicans other than the only thing I can promise that I'm going to listen to them and I'm going to fight for the needs of our people and not get caught up in all of the other nonsense. And so I think that's really resonated with a lot of people who have not historically voted Democrat or don't have a predisposition to vote Democrat, and that's been really encouraging to see and have those conversations. Um, gosh, I mean, I had people call me even after the primary election say I went and voted and voted for you, and this is the first time, and I'm going to vote for you again in the general. And so we've even had people who are not Democrats show up to like local Democratic meetings to say like, how can I get involved? How can I help the campaign? Like I voted Republican on all these other issues, but I believe in like who Ryan is and want to support. So that's been something that's been really cool to see.
Yeah, that's really encouraging. And you know what I keep thinking about when it comes to special elections, Alabama has a history of doing having very unexpected results from special elections. Doug Jones, Maryland lands recently. Um, do you feel like this is another special election that is a big opportunity? That it is very doable for you to win, is it not?
Yeah, I think statistically everyone thinks the numbers are against us, as far as like when it comes down to, oh, this is a Republican district, whatever. But special elections do pose an opportunity to flip the script completely. Um, and I think it, we've not been able to run a typical campaign. We didn't have enough time, right, to get rolling, and I'm not taking money from a bunch of PACs or lobbyists, so I don't have a lot of funds to just kind of saturate the community with all the things that we would probably need to get the communication out there. But I do think that special elections, obviously, they surprise us every time. It seems like just about there's such an opportunity for something to shift, and I do think that the opposition, the is kind of concerned about that. Every time, I keep hearing reminders about voting, reminders, coming, um, and the refusal to even kind of acknowledge me or my campaign is just trying to keep it as straight to the thing as possible. And so yeah, I think we could be really surprised come June 24th. I think as a community as a whole, because this is an opportunity. But at the end of the day, win or lose, this is so much bigger than even just this race for me. This is about setting a standard for saying we're going to keep showing up and we're going to put somebody here in this position, come hell or high water, come win or lose, no matter what the odds are. And that's one of the biggest things I do hope comes out of this is that come win or lose, that people say, you know what, we have to put someone in, we have to make sure we're running somebody. We got to get them somebody just so that at the very least we are showing that there's options, that there's a chance for democracy, and that we can push that. And I can't think of the poet right offhand, but there's this quote that I kept coming back to a lot early on is that someone like you has to fight and lose and fight and lose and fight and lose so that someday someone like you will be able to, or so, you have to fight and lose, fight and lose, fight and lose, and so someday someone like you can come along and win. And at the very least, this whole political game gets talked about is like chess. You're trying to maneuver and overtake and do all these metaphors are so beyond cliche when it comes to that whole thing. But for me, it's not anything about that. It's about sowing seeds for change. It's about believing that things can be different and trying my best to sow those seeds into our community, into the lives of our people, to say there's something bigger at play here, and there's something more at stake for our communities than Republican or Democrat or whatever else is going on. Like we have a future, and we can have a future if we come together and we find a way forward together. And um, so yeah, we'll see how the 24th or how June 24th roll plays out. But at the end of the day, like it's so much bigger than me, and I'm so excited and hoping that we'll see this continue a trend of people saying we're going to keep running. And one of the things, if I do lose in June 24th, and only got 2 more years for the seats back up. So just put that out there. It's we're halfway through the term that Gregory was supposed to finish for this time, and it's coming back up in 2 years. And so we'll fight again if depending on how things go. So
I think what I like most about you and this whole conversation is it really centers around one thing, and that's people. And I think, no matter what kind of election it is, a general election, a special election, it really boils down to the people and what they want and desire. And just like you said, if we have honest conversations with folks, they know where you stand, they know where you stand on issues, they'll be there and they'll show up for you. And I think that's what we need. And I'm really curious to folks here in Alabama, but also around. Like, what do you need? What do you need from us? How can anybody that's watching make you successful?
yeah, I mean, you can get involved. You can talk about what's going on, highlight, share stuff on social media. And also, we always need phone bankers and those kind of things. One of the things about it being a special election and us not having big corporate funding is that we don't have a lot of boots on the ground and we didn't have a lot of time. And so we didn't get a chance to do things like a traditional campaign. And so we're having to rely on things like a lot of phone banking and a lot of word of mouth and a lot of people just kind of showing up in pockets to hit kind of the core communities that we believe we can really, if we can get those people out, we can win. And so people can reach out if they want to get involved. If you're in those counties, please contact a chair. You can contact me or contact the county chair and figure out how you can get plugged in to the phone banking or whatever it is you may want to do. We always need help putting up signs and things like that. But the biggest thing is just sharing. You always contribute to the campaign, but if you're local, something I've said from the get go, if it comes down to giving to this campaign or feeding somebody in your community, please take care of them first, and we'll figure it out. Because we at the end of the day, those numbers are not going to be they're going to pale in comparison to what we can bring in versus what our opposition has already brought almost a $500,000, I think, in such 5 months time, and so. We got to play things differently here, and I would much rather your neighbors be fed than throw $25 my way. So we'll figure it out on our end.
How can people find you?
So CagleForThePeople.com is the website, and there's a pretty extensive breakdown of the platform on the website that I would hope people to go and look at. One of the big things too, sorry, I know this is an amendment to your question here, but it's one of the things that really bothers me is when we have these politicians who run and they don't actually have a platform. They just have some, kind of vague platitude about some topic with no like real material plan. And so the platform on our website is very comprehensive. It's not all the things obviously that are impacting our community, but it is a plan to respond to those. So please go to the website, check those out. From there, you can sign up to volunteer. You can reach out from there. There's all kinds of contact information on there that links to the Facebook page, and those kind of things. And so that's the biggest places right now. I'm doing virtual town halls on Tuesday nights. I'll do one tonight at 8 p.m. Because unfortunately, my invitations for town halls were not accepted by by other people, and it's hard to get around to everything. So we're doing virtual town halls on Facebook Live. If you go to Ryan Cagle, AL Senate District 5, my page, you can find those there. So yeah, please just reach out. You can get a hold of me a few different ways probably. So, but I would start there at the website. You can get to the Facebook and everything else from there.
So tell us a couple of your priorities in your platform.
Yeah. So out the gate, gosh, I have a lot of priorities, and I guess maybe that's probably why some of people who are running for office don't put anything forward. Is maybe they just have a lot of things they actually care about, and they don't know quite how to communicate them all. I think one of the biggest things for me is investing in our people and keeping our wealth local. And so there's a big contingent for the platform that really focuses on creating sustainable jobs and putting forward a way forward for us for our community to not continually have all of our wealth extracted and the burden be put on working class people to fund the programs that are actually being underfunded every other way that we actually depend on. And so that like goes down to like land and tax reform is a big thing for me, and the proposal we have kind of would fund everything else in the platform we have. But some of the big priorities for me are the opioid crisis, obviously, food insecurity, because those are the things I'm dealing with every single day. Rural healthcare, we see hospitals closing down left and right through Alabama. I think 18 in the last few years, right, total. I'm worried about what's going on in the federal government and how that's going to affect people, because I'm a fan. We don't have insurance. We're working class people, and we're dependent on medicating all kids, and we're dependent on going to the rural health clinic and paying out of pocket, and have been basically my entire life and my kids' lives. So I'm really interested in making sure those things are taken care of, because I see those impacting our community directly. Education is a big thing. My brother is a teacher. Several of my friends are teachers, and I just continually see them saying, like there's been no raises, cost of living raises. There's all these issues they're facing, and yet our state is now nearly double the amount of money they're going to be pumping into private schools and taking out of the education system. I think we're at 182 million for the Choose Act, and so we are depriving our community schools of the resources they need to fund private schools that are already making more money than should be. It's just beyond comprehension to me, looking at some of those schools and their tuitions and things like that. And so that's obviously really important to me. Um, and then when this is something that it seems like it tends to be a talking point, I think, about like public transportation. And for me, that's a big issue, because I every day I'm talking to people who are having to pay. There is some like semblance of public transportation here. If you can reserve the van, they can come get you. They give you a 3 hour window when they're going to be there, and then they give you a 3 hour window when they're going to get to carry you back, and then it's $40 round trip if you live out on the edge of the county, right? But the biggest thing, so like obviously buses and those kind of things with public infrastructure or public transportation, like when we think of like places like Birmingham or bigger cities, those things make more sense, and we do need to be funding, and we do need to be funding those kind of things. But one of the biggest things for me when I think about my life and my transportation needs and the needs of my community that we consistently see, is that working class people, they don't need a bus. They just need to make sure that their car is going to stay on the road. But oftentimes they're, if you're somebody who's working, working like crazy at a job, and you're not making enough money to barely get by, one alternator going out could just throw you for, you miss work, and then you can't get it, and then all of a sudden, you've lost your job. And that's a story. That's not an exaggeration. That's not a gross. That's not like a over exaggeration of what happens. I can't tell you how many people I know who've lost jobs because their car broke down and they had no way to get there. I have neighbors in this community who have to get up 3 hours early to ride with somebody else to work, even though they don't have to be there for 3 more hours every single day. And it's because they couldn't keep going, and they couldn't keep their vehicles on the road. And so we have to have, like, one of the things we talk about is like automotive free clinics. It's kind of like a, think of it like a kind of like a fire department of the automotive industry. And there's a lot of things on my platform about that. But all these things on my platform, they go back to putting the power back with our people. And the thing is, like, even like when we were talking about like healthy families and thriving communities and food insecurity, food banks are great. Like, we need food banks that are funded, right? But ultimately, that's a band-aid on a larger problem. And so, like, for me, part of the bigger issue here is thinking through is like, okay, we can make sure people are getting food, but then we also need to work to build resilient food systems so that local communities have access to food, and they know how to grow food, and they have ways to do that. And so everything in this platform goes back to putting the power back with our people, not just getting a handout, so to speak. And that's always the language, right? When it comes to social programs, oh, you just want people to have handouts, handouts, handouts. And like, no, I want people to be taken care of out the gate, no matter what. Whatever. It's not my place to judge people. Whatever, I know what's going on. They know what's going on in their lives. But the biggest thing about my platform issues is that the approach to them, I believe, are really rooted in the lived experiences of our people, of working class people and vulnerable people in District 5. And it's just like, hey, what does a solution to this actually look like here in this community, versus just kind of a blanket like, oh, we just need to fund another food bank, or whatever. So that's a big thing, is that undergirding this whole platform is this idea of reimagining what these issues and social programs and these things look like on the ground in actual rural communities like those in District 5, and how they can help us and how they can empower our people to live and thrive together. So
You love this state, obviously. I have left this state and come back as well. Something draws you back, I guess. Um, what do you see for the state of Alabama 10, 15 years from now? And I know this is an impossible question, but we have to see the future we want to start moving towards it. So, what is that future you want? I mean, you've got young kids, right? What's the future you want for them?
Oh yeah, gosh, that's such a good question, because I always, when I go back, when I talk about the work that we do, is I talk about the fact that I'm not a rich man. My kids are not going to inherit anything by way of money from me, short of like maybe some kind of life insurance policy that pays something, like they're not going to get an inheritance. But what I want to ensure they get is a community they can be proud of, and a community they know that's going to care for them in at their lowest moments in their lives. And that's what I'm working for. Long before we came to the Senate race, that's the vision of believing that there's a future for this place where my kids can grow up and be proud of it and know that there is a network of care in this community and in this state that says, you know what, we are going to fight for working class people. We're going to fight for vulnerable people, and we're going to be situated from places of compassion and not stigma, and with and that kind of thing. And so for me, I think again, like you're saying, is that to be able to get anywhere, we have to be able to imagine something different. And that's one of the problems I think facing Alabama and facing District 5 is that we don't think anything can ever change, and that's why we just keep doing the same things because it can't ever really change. And I've heard that. I've heard that on this campaign, and through this campaign. Well, you'll never, even if you get to this Montgomery, you're just going to be fighting the whole time. And I'm like, well, that's part of it, because if no one is willing to say like, hey, things can be different, like we're never going to get anywhere. And so for me, 10, 15 years from now, I think about the state as a whole. I would zoom in to Parrish, Alabama, and I would say that there's no one here in this community who has the fear that they're going to go without food, because there's a resilient food system here that is built up, and there are people who know that if Billy down the road loses his job, that their neighbors are going to make sure he has what he needs to keep his family fed until he gets back on his feet. Um, and that when a car breaks down, they're going to be able to go to the mechanic and get those repairs taken care of because of the systems we've put in place to support public transportation through that way. And that workers know that despite the fact that we live in a state that will fire that a job can fire you for anything they want, that they have protections and that they have policies on the state level that are supporting them and protecting them from retaliation for advocating for better working conditions. Those are the kind of things that I hope to see. Is that not just feel good, romanticize like nobody's hungry, and those, but that they're real people who are empowered to care for their communities and take care of these issues, and that those things are backed up on a policy level from the state. That our state sees a vision and sees a future where we say, what, it actually doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to incarcerate mentally people with mental illness endlessly. We don't have to keep building private prisons to funnel those people in there, because we actually could approach this totally different. People in our community don't have to starve or get expired food from a food bank that was passed down, from the state program. Because they know that there's community farms there in their community that they can go to and be a part of, and they can learn how to be connected to those things. And so there's all kinds of things obviously that I want to see a big thing in the future. This is something that really impacts our community, is in Alabama, that has shed its stigma for people who use drugs, that has turned towards a position of compassion for those people, realizing there is a myriad of factors that go on that create the conditions for somebody to enter into a life of substance use, and that stigma and hatred has done nothing but exasperate that problem, and our systems have done nothing but exasperate that problem. I want to see a community in 10 years where opiate overdoses are it's so bizarre to even hear that those happen, that it's just completely absurd, short of like just some freak accident. That's the kind of future I want to see for Alabama. I want my kids to be able to, walk down the street and not, see a used syringe, or because they know that, because those things are not there, because people have turned to different ways and engaging in those things differently. And I want to see a community of people who know that they're supported. Um, and all this goes back to policy. This question made me think of a question that I got asked. I was at the West Alabama Labor Council last month, I think, and one of the workers had been fired from a business for leading a union drive. And of course, they didn't say they fired him for that, but that's what they fired him for, because that's the only thing he did, right? And he just flat out asked me and my and Matt Woods, what do you do? What do you do, and how do you change this? And I was like, well, first out the gate, like we're a right to work state, and that means that jobs can do whatever they want to a worker no matter what when it comes to firing and hiring. And I was like, so we have to have those policies to put those people first, and it can't just be ceremonial stuff. And one of the rebuttals from the other side of the spectrum was like, oh, well, policy doesn't mean anything if you don't enforce it. And, and it's like a fundamental lack of understanding here is that a policy is something you enforce on behalf of the people. It's something, if you have policies that are pro worker, that are supporting them and preventing them from retaliation, it's not just a thing that just exists as like on paper. It's something that this is what we do because this is where we've drawn the line. And so for me, a future for Alabama looks like us saying, this is where we're going to draw the line, and this is what we're going to do to make sure our people are taken care of, despite whatever the federal government is doing, despite whatever out of state lobbyists and private equity firms want, because we need communities that are not beholden to the whims of company men and company towns, whether they're here at home or whether they're in Canada or in New York or wherever else that they show up from and set up camp here and extract our wealth from. And so that's a big thing too, is just seeing people empowered, our communities empowered. And I think, we can do that work. I see that work happening every day in our community, people taking care of each other. But it's so much better when there's policies and structures backing those things, incentivizing us, the ability, creating the conditions for us to better build healthy, thriving communities together. Because again, you might care a lot about your neighbors, but if you're working 6 12-hour shifts and barely keeping your lights on, it's really hard for you to care about them the way that they need, and it's probably hard for them to care about you the way they need, the way that you need. And so, on a state level, on a leadership level, if we can have those policies and those structures put in place, then we can allow these communities to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, so to speak, and be empowered to care for one another, and build something different there. And so seeds of change there in those local localities, in those rural communities all across Alabama. And so, like, that's what I hope for. I hope for a compassionate, loving, caring Alabama, which I see in my neighbors every day. I just don't see it reflected on the state level, and that's the biggest thing. Is I see it in my neighbors of all political persuasions. I see them doing the hard work of caring for their communities. But the thing is on the state level, it's not there, and it's definitely not there on the federal level. So
Yeah, that's so important what you're saying about empowerment. How do we empower people to know that their vote matters? Because I could not tell you how many times people have said to me, "It's Alabama, my vote doesn't matter here. Why should I bother to show up?"
right, yeah. Well, I think on some level there is some truth to that, depending on, if you look at the election, I mean, on especially larger elections like the federal elections that happen and those kind of things, is like if you look at the numbers, 30% of the state's population is getting to decide the future of our state in that way. And so there's been so much disenfranchisement, as we know, especially in rural black communities. There have been intentionally gerrymandered, and so they have been had their votes just completely stripped of meaning, so to speak, because of the way that we've set up systems here in Alabama. There's some things changing around that, which is good. But like here, like most people, in our community, like it doesn't matter either way. And so the biggest thing I think is showing them how it does. Is that like not, there's like the barrier of like dealing with people who are like, I'm going to vote this way because I have to vote this way because I've always voted this way. It's one battle to show them like, well, like, why do we keep doing these things? It's another battle altogether, like you said, to help people see like, no, this actually means something. And to me, the elections, these local elections, whether all the way from mayor up to state legislators, those are the elections that are most important in our communities. And I'm sure people can argue for other things, by all means. But for me in my life, those are the positions, those are the elections I see impacting me and my community the most. And I think our community has just been so disenfranchised from believing that those things can happen, that they actually matter. And that's one of the reasons we continue to have the system we have, is because they're just dependent on people not caring enough to believe it can change. And so I think we have to show them something different. And so to get people to believe their vote matters, we have to show them that there is another option, and that's a big part of what I'm doing, or what I'm trying to do at the least. I'm trying to show them that there is a different way. There's a different path forward for our communities. There's different ways of doing things and operating, and that's why our votes matter, is because those votes help make those things happen. But it starts there. It's relational. It's not easy, because systems have created this, but unfortunately there's no system coming tomorrow that's going to snap its fingers and boost voter morale and gerrymandering across the board and voter disenfranchisement. So it has to go back to the relational stuff. It has to go back to these people in our community saying like, no, we actually, this is important for us to do, and this is why, and being able to back that up and show them like how it's impacted them, and how voting at the very least it is a vote for a different future. Even if the odds are completely against how you're voting, it's a pledge to say I believe in something different, in this community. And it might not carry much weight right now. But if we keep doing it, if we keep putting our foot down, then it will. But it's again, it's a marathon, and I think that was one of the biggest things is voter. For most people, I think voting for the few people that come out and vote in Alabama, that is like the for 90% of them, that is like their peak civic engagement, right? At least that's what they think. Like but those are the same people who are showing up for their neighbors and do. There's people who never vote, don't think it's important, but they're the same people who will go and buy and make sure their neighbors are taken care of. And so it's being able to bridge that gap to show them how this plays a role. To help make sure that can happen easier and more efficiently, and your neighbor doesn't need as much help. So that's a big thing. Again, I think it just comes down to relationships. Everything comes down to relationships for me, but I don't know if that plays out everywhere. But in my work here in the community, that's where it starts. It starts with saying, you know what, we disagree, but we know each other, and but through that knowing, we can move something forward. And I think the Democratic Party in Alabama has to do a better job at connecting with working class folks and poor folks and finding ways to show them and get them out to vote. And that's a big thing too. Is that there are some systems and structures in the state, and there are some of those are being used to move people and help engage voters, but we need more of it because there's so much ground to cover. Um, yeah, and my kids, I mean, they're 10 years from being out of the house completely, both of them, and that's scary because 10 years doesn't seem like a whole lot of time. But I think if we just keep chipping away at this thing, if we keep fighting, if we keep showing up, and we keep building relationships with people, then we can see people show up too and say, I actually believe in something different, and I'm going to make sure my vote and my time goes towards helping make that happen. Whether that's feeding my neighbors, whether that's voting for a different candidate in the Senate district, or whether that's going to whatever it is. There's myriad ways we get there, but it's going to take all kinds and all ways, I think.
Well, we are appreciative of you, and what I'm most excited about with you is that something with us when we started Blueprint, it was we're not starting for 2026. It's not going to be over. We're not going to get everything done we need to get done in the next year and a half. This is for the long term, and I see that you are committed for the long term too, and that's so inspiring for us to know that there are candidates out there who are running for the big picture and not just for the election. And so we appreciate you, and we intend on doing whatever we can to help you as long as
Thank
this
you.
journey goes.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
yeah, and it's important too. Um, people need to have people that they know on the ballot.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, and
so we thank you so much for doing this, and whatever we can do to help you in the next couple of weeks,
yeah, thank you.
we
Yeah,
are more than willing to.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm super grateful for the opportunity. And this whole like long haul thing is like I know it's funny. I was just talking to somebody, like Matt, not just Matt Woods, but actually Matt Woods, Greg Reed before he stepped down, Tim Wadsworth, because Matt Woods is not actually my representative. I'm in Wadsworth, is his house district, but and Governor Ivey, like I've spent the last 2.5 years trying to be a thorn in their flesh because our sheriff's department murdered a mentally ill man named Tony Mitchell, and has there's been no real justice yet, even though there's been 13 indictments so far. And so I perpetually have emailed and called and led those charges, to our elected officials. And one of the things I keep thinking about is that come win or lose, June 24th, like I'm just getting started being a thorn in their flesh. So even if I don't win an election, I'm not going anywhere. All this work, all this advocacy that we're doing in this community is still going to be here, and I'm still going to be pushing back on them. And if anything, maybe Matt Woods might receive a little more pushback if he wins, because that means I'm free to just give some energy straight to that instead of all the other stuff. But um, I think we deserve, again, like we deserve people who are actually on the ground doing work. I think, and I'm by no means the best candidate. I'm not polished. I'm not. My grandmother, who's a long-term, lifelong Democrat, working class union family. My grandmother, she got to laughing really hard a couple days ago. She was like, "You think they're gonna let you walk in there in them shorts?" And I said, "No, Grandma, I don't think so." And she said, yeah, you're gonna have to buy a suit, and that's gonna be real funny. And so, that's just one of those things. But I'm excited to keep trying to push the envelope a bit and put pressure, hopefully in good ways. Even come win or lose, that doesn't change. We're still here. These problems are still here, and they're not going to go away tomorrow. And unfortunately, I don't believe our leadership is going to do anything to try to take those to alleviate those things. So the fight continues regardless.
Well, thank you. And just one last reminder: when is election
Yeah,
day?
June 24th. That's something we're trying to get out there. Just remind people to show up and vote. Absentee ballots are already you're already past the window for that if you needed to use absentee ballot. But yeah, June 24th. I think the polls are open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.